Well, hello there, everyone. Here, talk about right here. I talk about for Walmart memories right here, and I'm sure that most of us have been to those retail stores like a Walmart and Kmart and other retail stores, and let's just say maybe if it's at Walgreens or anywhere like that. But still, that this actually shows right here is this right here of me right here sitting down, and I can just remember that. Just to tell everybody here a story right here of talking about shopping a lot of times, and it seems like to me that everybody might even say too that yeah, if you're going to be shopping around, and let's just say that a lot of times it's like yeah, well really that why would you want to be looking around, looking around and looking at the stuff before you actually buy it a lot of times. But yeah, I can just remember walking into those aisles over there at Walmart a lot of times, and I can just remember that I would go into the electronics department a lot of times, and you know how that was. Is that whenever you walk into the electronics department, a lot of times that there will be a section in there where there will be like where you would be able to find CDs and then video games and television sets and boom boxes and stuff like that. So it sure seems that way that when we think about electronics, though, that's just a number. I'm like, yeah, like everybody else will probably say too that if that's supposed to be like what you call the magic word or something like that. But and half the time you'll likely want to know too that whenever you do go shopping at a lot of those retail stores, so it's like yeah, if you go shopping even in the jewelry department, in the jewelry section, you find all kinds of things that you like looking at and that you find real interesting and real neat. But it sure seems that way that when we speak about the electronics though and video games, but still that this right here is supposed to be a moment right here to where that I'm actually sitting down right here, and I could just remember this. It was the year. Oh, I think it was back in 1996, something like that. I was looking at the video games, and I can just remember that a lot of times that I would walk in there into Walmart, and I would spend about maybe 15, maybe 20 minutes, something like that, up to 15 minutes, looking through these catalogs right here. There would be like on a shelf right here, that there would be like a catalog, based on a video game, and so yeah, these little magazines and catalogs right here, and a lot of times it was like, yeah, that I would look through those catalogs, and I can just remember that I was talking to somebody there, one of those Walmart employees, and I can just remember, yeah, it was about the cheat codes, yeah, the cheat codes, and also about how to be able to beat this level, of the game. And I'm like, yeah, if I remember right, it was yeah, Mortal Kombat was one of those games, and the other game I think yeah was Street Fighter, and then also it was other other games that I'm sure most of us can remember. A lot of those games that you played, even on a Genesis console, that I can just remember that I would actually be I would find those games. A lot of times that they will be on the shelves, and like those games, and then the selections of different games and game controllers would be displayed on the shelves. And so I'm like, yeah, like telling people too, I don't really have any photographs really to show everybody here, but I'm just showing everybody here the sketch right here. This was right here was me right here doing shopping around, and 102 that hey that you want to tell everybody a story about whenever you experienced based on your shopping experience. And like nowadays it sure seems that way that that what's available now, it sure seems that way, yeah, that what they have now is to where you can actually shop online and actually look through the inventory. And whenever you go shopping now, they like say, yeah, most of the time, whenever you do your shopping, you're actually looking at those items first before you buy them. But a lot of times, that this story right here talks about that I would actually walk into the electronics department and actually sit down on the floor like this right here, and I would actually be looking at some of that stuff. I would look at it for about for a few minutes, something like that. I'm like, if I can remember right, then I think. after about maybe 4 days, or I'm like, yeah, after about maybe a week after I looked at some of that stuff, that I would actually buy maybe one or two things there. And sometimes I think, yeah, one or two of those things, one or two, yeah, either it was too expensive, or I was just not old enough really to buy it. And I know a lot of the cool video games, a lot of the cool magazines and game controllers, like everybody else would say too, that between 12 and 15 years of age still a lot of times. So it sure seems that way, that whenever you're going to be shopping around at a lot of those retail stores, that you might find a lot of the magazines and catalogs. But what I'm showing right here is actually, yeah, it's supposed to be an example right here of like a guide right here, like a little game guide right here. But still, that you have right here is this right here is me right here. And I would just yeah, I would walk in there into Walmart and actually sit down on the floor and actually be reading through, looking at the stuff, and actually yeah. So I can remember that I would talk to one of the employees there, and I can just remember that I would be talking to them about the game, that I was looking up. And the 102, yeah, like people might say that the typical stuff that you would actually be going to the library for and looking up information, right? And for sure that most of the time, with everybody else would say too, that yeah, well, really, you should be going to the library to look up that information, not actually going to the stores. The stores that have it to where you can actually buy the catalogs, and then knowing that, I'm like, yeah. So it's like during the time, no, it was like, yeah, that if you were to be going and shopping and at 102, that did you actually buy anything? I'm like, yeah, later on, later on time, I can just remember buying something. And it was like, yeah, go in there and you buy a video game, or you buy a catalog or something like that, and maybe a game controller. So I drew right here as a game controller right here. But I could just remember going in there to Walmart a couple of times, and I can just remember that I think, during that time, that like every time I think about computers, though, it's like, back before I could even afford to get my own computer, that I can just remember a lot of things. I'm like, yeah, a lot of things for what refreshes my memory a lot of times. And like everybody else would say too, that you just go ahead and draw out for what you can remember and all that. But what I can remember actually is I can just remember seeing this rack right here. And I can just remember seeing game controllers on these racks right here. And also the other, accessories that were related to video games. And maybe another shelf right here that contained a lot of other merchandise. But still, that it was like, yeah, that back in 1996, that in order to be able to talk, I'm like, yeah, in order to be able to talk to people about what's available in the stores, and maybe about have you, I'm like, yeah. So I can just remember that they're walking into the store right there, and you're 102, that you talk to people. And 102, that, yeah, well, really, that you see merchandise on the store shelves, right? But at the same time, that you might talk to somebody who has not played the game yet. So a lot of times, even if it is maybe SpongeBob, or maybe if it is something, I'm like, yeah, from back in 1996, well, what was the most popular game that you can remember playing? And I'm like, you remember seeing it a lot of times. They're like, yeah, besides if it's a RoboCop, or any other game like that. But I can just remember that yeah, back in 1996, that yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm like, other games from back in the 90s. But I can just remember that it was Mortal Kombat. A lot of times I would usually see a lot of those games. I'm like, yeah, if you were to play a game, a lot of Genesis games, if you see those on the store shelves, and other accessories. But the type of stuff that I know that you would, a lot of those cool game accessories, that you would probably find those in like stores like Best Buy a lot of times, and other top retail stores. But still, the story that I'm telling you about right here is actually me right here. That I would actually be spending more time looking at the stuff before I actually bought the stuff. So it's like, yeah, that so if you got paid an allowance like on a Friday afternoon, and a lot of times it was like you would be looking at what was on the shelves and what you wanted to buy. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that we would probably be like that, to where that if you were to be going into the electronics department, and you would find maybe there was one time of the week to where that you would find a few things that were left in stock, and maybe a few things that were on clearance sale or something like that. And so you're likely one to know too that you'll go in there and look around and see what was on the shelves and all that. And a lot of times it was like, yeah, well, really, the things that you could afford and the things that you could not afford during a time. But I can just remember sitting down on the floor like this, and I can just remember that one of those the Walmart employee asked me, I'm like, hey, what you doing here, young man? And I told him that I'm trying to figure out, how I'm like, yeah. So I would actually walk into the electronics department and sit down on the floor like this right here, like if I was actually at a library. And like everybody else would say too, that most of the time, most libraries, that you can actually pick out a catalog or a magazine and actually read it, and you spend a few minutes just look around. I'm like, yeah, you weren't bothering no customers or anything like that, but still, that once or twice that some of those employees would ask me that we ask you to go ahead and buy that stuff, and then you can go and look further into that. And so I can remember, I think once or twice that somebody there was wondering that whenever if you find something there in the section to where if you wanted to buy it, such as maybe if it's a radio, a boom box, or maybe a CD or something like that, that they would ask you to where that besides trying it, that we would ask you that if you like it, then why don't you buy it? And so nowadays I'm like, yeah, we're talking about 1996. I'm talking about back in 1996, that a lot of things that they have now, that what they didn't have back in 1996. But like it's like, yeah, that I'm like, yeah, a lot of things, of course. I'm like, yeah, besides the online shopping and everything. But it sure seems that way, that when we speak about from back in 1996, though, that I can just remember that that I did, like I whenever I walked into the electronics department over there in Walmart, I can just remember that I would look around, and then I would see a lot of the computer games, a lot of the computer accessories, and I can just remember that whenever I would see those video games, and I would ask somebody there that I would look at the front and back cover, a lot of times of those video games, right? I'm like, I would, and I know that I'm like, yeah, the shelves right here, but a lot of times that you would go into those aisles and you would pick out a video game, right? And a lot of times it was like you would look at the front and back cover of those video games, and it would look like something, kind of like this right here. Not really, but you would find a video game, something like that right there, that you would see like the front and back cover or something like that. And like I say, yeah, you would find a video game that that looked very familiar. A lot of times it seemed like it was all about the familiarity about the video game, right? You've seen that front cover before. I'm like, yeah, if it seemed very familiar to you, I'm like, yeah, a video game that looked very familiar, that you've seen it before because you heard people talking about it, but yeah, it was not available for the game system that you had. And let's just say if it was like a Sega Game Gear during a time, and so let's just say if you were shopping around and for a video game, right? But then you see a video game that you were looking to get at some point, but then it was not available for the Genesis console. It was available for the computer. And so I can just remember talking to somebody there in Walmart. I can remember asking them do you know if this is for the Genesis? And they said that no, you had to, you had to have a computer in order to be able to play it. And so it's like, one of those games was Mortal Kombat, but I know that that there might have been, from back in 1996, that there probably was a lot of other games that probably were, that I know that were available to play for like the Mac and for the PC and all, but still but I can just remember that whenever you go into these stores nowadays, it sure seems that way. That if you do the same title and maybe the same topic, I'm like, let's just say if you're shopping around, looking around for a video game, and let's just say that you come across any products in the aisle, such as maybe for like maybe the keychains, or maybe for the battery packs or something like that, or maybe for maybe for the memory cards or something like that. So a lot of times, yeah, you know how that is, that whenever you're going to be doing any sorts of window shopping, a lot of times it's like, yeah, you whenever you go shopping around in those stores for really for just maybe for just that one thing, and let's just say that just to kind of get your own idea for what's available, what's out there, right? And so a lot of times it seemed like that yeah, you go shopping into those stores, and it sure seems that way, that you would spend more time looking around than compared to actually shopping and buying the stuff, right? And how many times are we really going to think that way, toward it? You have merchandise right here on the floor, right here. You got the game controller, and then maybe if you have maybe a few connector plugs or something, I'm like, yeah, connector adapters or something like that. So a lot of times it's like, yeah, when we think about shopping, though, that you basically say is toward it, yeah, you're supposed to put items into a shopping cart to be ready to shop for it, right? Just to be able to buy this stuff, and so it's like, yeah, that so, and let's just say that if you were just in Walmart, maybe shopping around, maybe for a bed comforter or something like that, maybe for a pillowcase or something like that. So let's just say that, like everybody else would say too, that, whenever you go shopping around, and I can also maybe include like maybe a candy bar or something like that. So it sure seems that way, that, yeah, like a king size candy bar right here. But everybody else would say too that, whenever you go shopping in places like Walmart, though, a lot of times it's like, yeah, that, you want to know too that, whenever you go shop, I'm like, yeah, here's the example, yeah, candy bar or something, but a lot of times it sure seems that way, that whenever you're going to these stores a lot of times and doing shopping around, that it seems like that you want to ask the question toward it, that you spend more time looking around than compared to buying stuff, compared to the shopping around. So let's just say a candy bar, it could also, back in 1996, maybe yeah, pair of shoes, or I think a lot of times, yeah, a lot of things that I would usually buy would be like, yeah, cassette tapes, soundtracks a lot of times. So that's usually, most of the time, that's usually what I would buy there. I'm sure we all remember those back in those days. I'm like, yeah, you would buy the boombox, and maybe you would buy cassette soundtracks, and I'm like, yeah, back in 1996, they had the CDs and the soundtracks a lot of times. So it's like, yeah, I'll just draw a box right here, but you're still at you would see a lot of times whenever you go into those stores, though, it sure seems that way, that you would be going in there and maybe shopping around for something, and a lot of times it was like, yeah, you spend more time just looking around, doing your shopping around, looking around, and you spend a few minutes just looking around, and but it sure seems that way, that, yeah, that I can probably say too that, now, since yeah, like everybody else would say too, that now, since if you have a bike or a car or something like that, that a lot of times it seems like that the reason why you go into Walmart, or maybe if you go into maybe AutoZone or someplace like that, that you would maybe go there to maybe buy accessories, maybe like a fuel pump accessories or something like that. And most of the time, that's usually, like anybody else would say too, besides the pharmacy department, that you would be shopping around for other things that maybe that you did not shop around for whenever you were a kid, right? So it's like, yeah, that so every time you think about that, though, you want to know too that when back whenever you were about maybe 10, 11, 12 years old, that you actually got the idea, just by, like, people say that you walk into Walmart in 102, that, even if it is phone accessories, though, that you would, you would see these little painted labels right here on the floor, right? And I think Walmart a lot of times had like the blue painted labels, and but still, that the light blue painted labels a lot of times, there was the Walmart. So it's like, so you would see these the way that the aisles were categorized and all that to where you would actually see stuff like the aisles right here, and so the way things were stocked in those departments, right? And so a lot of times it sure seems that way, that that whenever you're going to be walking into these departments in a 102, that you spend at least 15 or 20 minutes looking around and just kind of seeing what all that was available on the shelves. And I can just remember that that I would be sitting down right here, and just only for about maybe how long was it? I would say about 15 minutes. I would walk into Walmart, and there would be like an aisle right here. So there would be just enough space right here to where that there would be like an aisle right here. They would have like the batteries and maybe the headphone connectors section or something like that. And one aisle for the video games, and maybe another. I'm like, so it's like so whenever you walk into the electronics department, it seems like that it's all a lot of things, like for the boom boxes and everything, we're all split into different categories. Like you have one spot where they would have the computer section, and then also the televisions, and as well as the for the music session. So a lot, everybody else would say too, well, even if you're going to be going into electronics department, just to be able to find the music section, section such as with the video. I'm like, that with the cassette tapes and the CDs, the cassette tapes, and I'm like, from back in '96, but I know nowadays that they have it to where I'm like, the iTunes radio and all, but still that but I can just remember that that walking through these aisles, and I know I can just draw right here some examples right here of like the things for how things are priced a lot of times, and like everybody else would say too, that well, really, that whenever you do any shopping around, for any stores, whenever you do see things on the shelves a lot of times, like everybody else would say too, that especially if it's on clearance, if it's on sale or if it's on clearance, a lot of times that you would see stuff like, that whenever you if you were to be shopping around, that you would see stuff on the shelves that would be marked priced a lot of times, and like everybody else would say too, well, really, that whenever we're shopping around, and if I can remember right, that phone, if it was headphones or something like that, so it's like a lot of times that how that is that whenever you do see items on the shelves, a lot of times it's like something that look real neat. A lot of times people might even say too that really, what's your reason to maybe why you would buy or maybe add something to the cart, if you see something that looked real interesting or something like that. But still, that but you have right here, talk about for the game controller right here. So a lot of times it's like you would go into the store a lot of times to just to do shopping. I'm like, look around a lot of times, and let's just say though that you would actually looking through those catalogs a lot of times. I would spend more time actually reading the catalogs. I'm like reading to the catalogs and everything. So these catalogs would show the different characters and everything during the gameplay, and a lot of times it was like, that like everybody else would say too, that it would include a picture, and then it would also include like the details about it during gameplay, and how to beat a certain level, and other things too. But still that But I just want to tell everybody here, I don't have no pictures really to show everybody, so that's why I'm just sketching it out right here. But still, but I can just remember that a lot of those Walmart employees, like I think once or twice that they asked me that, yeah, well those items are for buy. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like compared to going to the library so it's like, yeah, during the time that you can, and I'm sure they say that you can, some of that stuff that you could check out from the library just to be able to read about it, but still, but talk about for video games most of the time that a lot of times I would go in there and just find the catalogs that talk about the cheat codes and maybe the different levels that you can. I'm like, so yeah, so I think two of the Walmart employees that told me that they haven't played the game yet, so they wouldn't know too much about it. So I can just remember that they're going in there and. Well, I know back whenever you were young, know that a lot of times it was like that one thing that the first thing that you thought about though a lot of times it was like, yeah, well really that from back what you know now compared to back what you knew then, it was like, yeah, well really that whenever you first learned the basics about the computers though a lot of times it seems like that you actually really that now since you got a computer now that really what all that you do you know now than compared to what you know that you didn't know from before. And a lot of times it was like, yeah, well really I can tell everybody here to where that if you spent more time studying, and it seems like to me that that's really the case, is to where that if you spent more time reading about it, I'm like, yeah, more time reading about it and exploring. And I guess you could say that, yeah, if you were, I'm like, yeah, explore your opportunities, whichever, but still, so it sure seems that way that you would spend more time reading about something and maybe if you would actually buy something, but a lot of times it sure seems that way that back before you could even afford to buy a lot of those accessories that you would just spend more time looking around and just trying to make it, make your decision a lot of times like everybody else would say too. It seems like that was usually the case, is to where you go in there to the store, you go in there to the store a lot of times, and you would see just a variety of different things on the shelves a lot of times. It seems like that was usually the case, that you walk in there into these stores and you would actually see a variety of things on the shelves. So battery packs and maybe phone accessories and you name it. Whenever there was a truck that came in, like let's just say if there was a truck on a Tuesday or something like that, you would see all kinds of things on the shelves. And 102 that, yeah, well really that not everybody likes seeing an empty shelf a lot of times. So it was like that whenever you go in there and you would see a lot of the shelves that were full of different all kinds of merchandise, and especially during the holidays, right? But I can just remember that walking in there into Walmart, and I can just remember that it was like, yeah, you sitting there and just looking at the stuff, and somebody there was saying, I'm like, yeah, you talked to somebody there, and I can just remember I asked them that, yeah, well, how do you get to this character to do this certain move and all that? And I can just remember the person was saying, hey, I don't know, I haven't played the game. So during the time, I can just remember that people who worked there at Walmart would know more about the video games and the accessories if they work there, and maybe if you can find a lot of those accessories there, you can maybe talk to somebody there. But just like if we're talking about maybe for a team sport or something like that, you talk to somebody there and at 102 that yeah, well I'm like, yeah, so let's just say like everybody else would say too, that you walk into these stores and you talk to somebody there, yeah, you found, yeah, if it's makeup products or something like that, and you want to know too that how does this work, or hey that how do my so yeah. So it sure seems that way. That all starts by saying is to where you want to go ahead and talk to the employees. Maybe the employees know too much about that, but a lot of times it sure seems that way. That if there's a video game or something that you maybe like everybody else would say too, that you talk to somebody there at the store, and it's like, yeah, I think, yeah, that was the case. By the way, if you see that video game available on